Okay, now there's another role play in here. What if staff do not want to hear about it or think you're interfering with their unit? So you've got the head nurse. What would that role play look like? Isn't that interesting? If you just think about how do I have that I would love it, Frank, Joe, Sally, whoever, if we could, you know, I was at this interesting meeting. If we could do some interesting things, maybe some experiments, what does that conversation look like? Because I know when I've been in inpatient units, I'm a little worried about saying things that piss certain people off who run those places. I don't think I'm a lot different than anyone else. And I also know if I'm pissed off, they're pissed off, it gets on around me, and I can get tortured systematically by calls in the middle of the night. You know, it's, you know, in restaurants, they spit in your hamburger, you know. And on the industry, they call you up in the middle of the night, you know. So the relationships are critical. So how do I do that? I mean, that's so we're talking about one with the kid. There's one with the staff as well, even to begin. Very lovely. We're going to come back to some of this when we get onto assessments, because you're kind of going there. What'd you get here, Victor? Or is it down here? Or Marie, whoever did it? Jane.
We talked about in the training, you know, kind of reminding staff, because you guys are required to do this anyway, you might as well use the tools you're required to use. You know, use of the personal safety plan and a debriefing, which you have to do anyway. But I think that a lot of people see that as a piece of paper that has to be filled out rather than what it was intended to be, which is a tool. So, you know, kind of going back over with not just the staff, but with the kid and the family as well. You know, what's the purpose of this sort of safety plan? Why do we do this? Why do we change it? Then kind of looking, you know, are the triggers that we identified not right anymore? If we're seeing an escalation in behavior, what are we missing? Did the triggers change, or did something change in the milieu or in the staff or in the child and family that are triggering changes that we didn't identify and we don't have plans for?
Leads very nicely right into assessment, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And therapeutically, you know, looking at skill development, are there skill sets that this child doesn't have yet that are you know, would be helpful to him and the family and the staff maybe? And then engage the child in impacting their behavior.
Question for you, Jane.
Yeah.
This personal safety plan, is this for the nursing staff or the techs to do so they'll be safe, or is this to help the kid when the kid comes in? Okay.
Yeah.
So in a way, I would even think of this as a very interesting therapeutic step with the child.
Right, and it should be, every time they have a seclusion or a restraint, it's supposed to be revisited.
If it's done empathically and genuinely, how do we help you next time?
Exactly. Yeah. Seems like our stuff broke down. Let's go back and look at this. You know, and what I really love, and some places do this, is have the child also be actively engaged in that tracking. You know, so I think that's where its power comes.
Yeah. That's where
and then pharmacologically, Dr. Hong was mentioning that he likes to do the behavioral chain analysis after there's been an incident. I know also that a lot of our, if not all of our SIPPs, track by shift, by staff members, by whatever, where these things seem to occur to see if they can see a pattern. That's good. I remember Sandy Pines not too long ago identifying that there was one certain nurse on one certain shift who seemed to be having a lot of trouble, and they went back and did some training, and it was a very, very good move. I think everything just kind of went down. And then the assessment process was all kind of tied up in all that. I don't think we identified a specific assessment, but just more just looking at
so let's go to
the plan that we have in place, you know, maybe tied in with the medication, but also with the behavioral stuff.
Okay, so Jane took us all the way through, and they concluded, we don't want to do anything with meds right now. Let's just kind of look here. Okay, look at this. Very interesting. Look at all that thoughtful kind of more detective work. I love it. So they did many of the same things. They also had some other ways of getting at the kid therapeutically. The same circles thing, you're going to distribute that circles, right? Yep. Information on circles. A trauma group, what are his triggers? And then this is detective work. Now you did say, should we discontinue or change something? But why, what are y'all thinking of here? Why would you be thinking about changing or discontinuing? Yeah, let's just take that for a minute.
Yeah, one of the thoughts we have is that perhaps he's having a rebound phenomenon from the psychostimulant from the concern if he's having the same types of outbursts each time during the day. Maybe it is pharmacologically related. And some of the other, as you were saying, some of the other detective work with the medications, taking a look at that and reviewing the history.
Levels, clever.
Yeah, and just looking at the CMP, the liver functioning, and see if we're missing anything, medication and biologically.
So I think all of you kind of said, let's think about this medicine thing. What might be going on in the milieu that could be related to every this? Throw out words, throw out terms. What's your experience? What could be going on in the milieu?
Staff change.
Peer relationships.
Peer relationships. What else?
And he's works with male figures. We need to identify what is the.
Okay, I want 2-word phrases. New staff. What else? Okay, good. What else? What?
Getting ready for
Discharge. Yeah, big one. What else? A recent visit didn't go so well. What else?
Could be male staff or female staff.
Could be male staff, female staff.
Lost his level.
Lost his level.
Usually it's relationship problems with peers.
That's a big one, you know. Someone said something.
Girls and boys.
Bad things, you know, every now and then we hear about sexual abuse or something by a staff person. You know, I'm sure it hadn't happened here, and I don't know of any place in Mayo it's happened, but I know it's happened in the States I've been in other situations. Bad stuff. What else?
Sexual acting out on other patients.
Okay, sure, okay. So how about intrapsychically, this is where, what's your name? Yeah. And I think John were kind of going, how might this child's brain be built differently that processes information differently that could be real important issues here?
His performance IQ was higher than his verbal.
Okay, that was
I
interesting.
wanted to know if he, he's probably a concrete thinker. He probably does better with images than he does with words.
Doesn't use words
I
well.
want to find some kind of sensory method for him to calm down.
Maybe he misunderstood what the kid said.
Exactly.
Who knows? Yeah. What else cognitively? Impulse control? Okay, so I don't mean, yes, but all of that stuff, how the brain, how the person, so impulse control, social skills, interpreting social messages or misinterpreting, ability to use skills like humor to defray a stressful moment. I'm just thinking about all the things we take so for granted. It goes back to, why would this child decide to start throwing chairs all around? It does kind of lead back into what Lisa's talking about, Plan B. I wonder what is going on in this kid's brain. How about biologically? I heard a bunch of them. What could be the biologic issues here? Rebound, what else?
Use of stimulants, if it is linked with the right after the dose of stimulant. Let's say child is taking,
Stimulants can also make kids worse. So yeah, is this a recent dose change?
Akathisia, child is
Akathisia, absolutely.
The fact with the Depakote, you can also have that.
Absolutely.
And
What do we know about cocktails? Nothing. Okay, what we know is when you put a kid on 5 meds and we bring him into units like this and you take them off all meds, about 1/4 of kids are less problematic. They have fewer symptoms. So how they got to those 5 meds, we don't know. But we know we had those other problems of continued escalation, right? So what I've tried to do here is just kind of think about, if we were to think about kind of ask the staff and play Columbo or play detective, we'd probably find out. But then we have to teach this, we have to teach our friends to think that way. We have to say, well, what do you want? I mean, that people, it's not something natural for someone who's graduated from high school and takes a while to really learn to think that way. And asking Todd, of course, would be really important. But guess what I'm getting at is, boy, there's subtle teaching that has to be, maybe sometimes not so subtle teaching, that has to be modeled in all of these. You mentioned the biologic, the milieu issues, discharge, et cetera, and of course these areas that span between the biologic and the psychologic. Now, what I would like to do is think about this kind of case and where we end up using meds before we've really done our assessment. And in fact, John, you were a perfect straight man. If I were to make a single recommendation to our biggest problems across the country is we don't know how to assess. And then we go in with a tool before we know what we're trying to fix. And we haven't, and it's this psychological and social and environmental and contextual work all has to be carefully thought through and teaching everybody to think that way. And as soon as somebody has a sense of anger or taking sides, it's diagnostic of what? It's pathognomonic for what? There's probably about 5 answers to that question, but let's see what you come up with. I think about 3 or 4. So as soon as your team or members of any member of the team begins to think, you know, well, here's the problem. It's, you know, begins to do this kind of thing, picking up on the points on the other table about blaming or authoritarian or pushing back, that is diagnostic of
Personality disorders.
no, I wouldn't want to say that. Major problems in your unit. Major is real simple. You got problems. That is a huge issue. There's a big training issue right in front of our eyes. If we see that happening, oh, how am I going to take that on? That's dicey, and how long can we let this stuff go on? And guess what's going to substitute? A medication. That's, for many cases, it'll come down to that, or battles about medication. So that's the context for some of our medication problems, is that we fail to think in the right way and to assess in the way, because it's a tough kind of thinking. It's a non-defensive, impersonal, not take it seriously when the kid threatens me, and deal with my own anxiety. And I need colleagues and others who are trained in a similar way to kind of get through it. And the other part of that is, how do you do it in a busy 24-hour settings? Now, we've begun to come up with a few ideas. It's maybe how the kid has his own little rating scale that's built in. Maybe the nursing staff have their own rating scale and for their milieu or by shift or something. But that's kind of our problem. And this, we go light on this, we screw up everything else. That's my personal thing. If we don't assess and don't track this stuff, meds will fill the crack. So, so that's kind of basically, how do we start putting evidence-based assessments and then not to skip on this step. Now, just for show of hands, how many people have maybe you do it by state, how many of your units has a systematic tracking tool to both identify the kid's symptoms and use to track and monitor throughout the course of stay? 1, 2, 3. What do you have?
We have a behavior list.
Behavior checklist. And you use it? Do you use it to adjust medicines or to track progress?
And the behavior and the
Wonderful. What do you have?
All together, just like her.
Is it the same form?
No, I don't think so, but it's
Okay.
a behavior.
Homemade or your own units? What is yours? Your own? Yeah. Devereaux? Okay, good. Okay. So that means a lot of our units, we don't have that. So that's important. It's like giving aspirin without never taking a temperature. If we did aspirin that way and the kid had anaphylaxis, we'd all be sued. But we took his temperature by feeling his forehead. We've got to teach our staff to do better than that. And so in most settings, docs, we think about all the reasons we can't do it. And so in New York State, we went through all this. Oh, it takes too much time. You can't afford not to take this time. Oh, I don't know what the right scales are. You know, then people are treating this scale. I mean, there's just this is all urban myth. So we went to New York State, and that's what the docs told us, is we did a bunch of focus groups for just saying, let's use a thermometer. Yeah, thermometers aren't perfect either, but let's have a communication tool. The kid can talk about why he scored it a 7, what a 7 means to him. That's a great conversation with that kid. That's a cool conversation. And so you can see some of the issues, all surmountable. What we know is once we coach doctors to do this, they said time wasn't a problem anymore. It's all in our minds. You know, it's just what we think is important. How about side effect scales? There's another one we don't do. Time again. Oh, they're complicated. No, they're not. Yeah, but some of the docs said, well, I'm just lazy.
Let me ask you, what's the N on these?
These about 40 docs in 5 or 6 focus groups across New York State in units just like this.
Okay.